and welcome to my channel, Geri in Stitches, where you can follow along on my sewing adventures. And today we're going to be doing some ombre dip dyeing. But before we head on over, remember to subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, follow me on Instagram at Geri in Stitches, and don't forget to ring that bell for more content. Okay, confession time and full disclosure. I've never actually done this ombre dip dyeing before with more than one color. I've made something which is a vest, and this is on denim, and this is kind of like an ombre effect with only one color. So this whole project, I'm jumping in like a virgin. So you might see me make mistakes. I might have to troubleshoot. And you know how with dyeing, once you do something, you can't really go back for a second take. So I'm living dangerously here. Are you ready for this ride? I'm not sure I am. Anyway, the thing that I'm dyeing today is a matching set of the Ashton tank from Helen's Closet Patterns, and also from the same company, the Winslow Culottes. This was made up in a viscose, which is 100% natural fibers, and we are using Rit Dye all-purpose dyes. That's why we need something that is 100% natural fibers for the best results. And if I have enough dye, I might slip in another dress that I have made from cotton, and this was a hand-me-down from a friend of mine. And so I don't know, if it works out, I might also dip this into the dye as we go along. So here are the tools and materials required. All this time that I'm talking, I've already got hot water boiling on the stove because that's needed for the dyeing process. You would need to pick your dyes, whatever colors, however many colors that you want, and also pick up the ColourStay dye fixative to prevent the colors from bleeding. You would need a plastic container like this for the dip dyeing to happen. I have some hangers here to hold on to the garments when it's dip dyeing, and to keep the clothes on the hangers, some clothes pegs, and I've got other clips just in case that doesn't work. Gloves, some things to stir the water, the dye water, measuring cup, measuring spoons, and for the fibers that I'm working with, salt. All right, and on the table that I'm working on, I have some plastic cover so that I am not staining my furniture. So I think that's it. And also pick up the fabric or the garment that you're going to dye. Right, here's the game plan. The game plan is that for the garments, the ombre coloring is going to move through 3 shades or 3 colors. The first one is Tangerine, and then it's going to move to Fuchsia, and then it's going to move into a raspberry. Now, I don't really have a raspberry, so I'm using the Scarlet to help me by mixing about perhaps a tablespoon of it into the Fuchsia, and then it will darken from Fuchsia to raspberry. So that's my game plan. And because I'm doing a matching set, the tank top is going to go from Tangerine, Fuchsia, and then raspberry, and then the pants are going to go in the reverse order. Raspberry, Fuchsia, and then Tangerine for the hem. So here's my strategy. Because I'm working with 3 colors, I've decided that I'm going to dip dye the middle color first, and that would be Fuchsia. And because the darkest color is actually a combination of these 2 colors, I'm going to dip dye 2/3 of the garment in the Fuchsia, and then add the Scarlet into the same dye solution for the darkest shade. Okay, and so I've prepped the garments this way on a hanger and clothes pegs, so that maybe I can maneuver them properly. I don't know how much this would help, but I guess it in some ways acts as a counterweight. And if I have dirty gloves and I don't want to touch the garment, then I can maneuver the garments from the hanger. Does that make sense? The first thing to do is to prepare the dye bath for the first color. So into 3 liters of hot water is a 1/4 cup of salt, and then 6 tablespoons of Rit Dye and 1 teaspoon of dish detergent. The really important thing here is the size of the container for the dye bath, which needs to be wide enough to allow the garments to move freely in the dye solution, but not so wide that there isn't enough depth of dye solution to effectively dip dye your garment. Okay, here goes. Into the dye solution goes the garments, which I have dampened first with water. Make sure that the garments are not soaking wet though. Squeeze out as much excess water as possible and ease them into the dye bath. This technique I'm using here is allowing time to do its job. The darker part of the garment goes in first, and basically I am planning mainly one darker shade that moves into just another lighter shade. Once the garments are in the dye bath, constantly agitate them in the bath to achieve more evenness in the coloring. After about 5 minutes, I then shift the garments deeper into the bath to create the lighter shade. As I am doing this though, I am discovering that there's a very distinct dye line created from the initial 5-minute dip, which means that the darker shade may be very clearly defined from the lighter shade. I wanted to blur up this line for a more gradual fade, but then a disaster happened. So a glass fell off the kitchen counter into 1,000 pieces, and I had to stop the dip dyeing to sweep and vacuum up the mess. So I lost some precious minutes to try to fix this too distinct line. And when I came back, I immediately turned the garments around to even out the dyeing. As you can see, there's some patchiness here, so it has to be done. And then I flipped the tank top as well, allowing the garments to hang off the lips of the plastic containers, which seem to work quite well here. Before adding the second color, I first shifted the garments higher up from the dye solution because that's where the second color is going to begin. And I'm using the same dye bath from before and adding 1 to 1.5 tablespoons of the Rit Dye Scarlet into this fuchsia dye bath. It looks like I'm putting in 3 tablespoons, but actually the spoon that I'm using is a half tablespoon. So it's actually 1.5 tablespoons, as you can see from the video. And you want to make sure that you add the color into the water instead of onto the garments, and then give it a good stir. And it'll be good to move the garments around also, so that you'll have more even coloring here. The only thing that I'm worried about right at this point is that the temperature of the water may not be hot enough. It feels warm to me, and that the temperature is good enough, but to really know, you would need to get a thermometer only for dyeing, and I don't have that on hand. The temperature of the water needs to be at least 60 degrees Celsius or 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm making a mental note now to get myself a thermometer just for dyeing. And I am transferring these garments into another bucket, suspending off the bucket like this because I'm preparing to dye the third color. The dye bath for the tangerine color is basically the same as the fuchsia dye bath. So into 3 liters of hot water goes 1/4 cup of salt, 1 teaspoon of dish detergent, and 6 tablespoons of the Rit Dye Tangerine. I am now dyeing the last 1/3 portions of the garments, and as I was dipping them into the dye bath, I was partly liking this white stripe that separated one color from the other and thought to keep it as a design feature. Then a few minutes later, I changed my mind and went back to the original plan of the tangerine moving into the fuchsia, and those few minutes of indecision again caused a distinct line to form from the darker shade of orange into the lighter shade, which didn't look bad. It just wasn't what I had in mind. I don't really know if you can see on camera exactly what I'm talking about, this demarcation of darker tone into lighter tone, but here I am trying to fix this hard line by dipping more of the garments inside the dye bath, and hopefully that would help with the blending more. And my fingers are crossed. I really hope that this would turn out better than I think. The ColourStay Dye Fixative bath is 3 liters of hot water with 6 tablespoons of dye fixative. Mix it all up, and then the dyed garments can be soaked in this mixture for 20 minutes, and this prevents the bleeding of color when it goes through the cold water rinse and then a cold water bath and then the laundry. Remember I said I was dyeing a hand-me-down dress? Well, here it is soaking in the hand-me-down dye baths that I made from before. And the temperature is definitely lower than the ideal 60 degrees Celsius, but I'm taking a chance to see if it will work. Let's get back to the matching set, which is ready for the cold water rinse and the laundry, and then we'll have our first reveal. After the first wash, I can immediately see that there are some things to improve upon. First, the distinct lines separating the different shades can be faded out more so that the colors can blend one into the other better. Here, you can really tell the distinct lines. And when I turn this around, there are some issues with patchiness that need to be resolved. So I'm going to try a different approach for the second attempt. Ombre Dip Dyeing, take 2, and I'm trying out a different method this time. The garment is back in a new fuchsia dye bath, but I am now constantly dipping it in and out. I do this for at least the first 10 minutes, which is the time frame that is most crucial for the colors to penetrate. And hopefully this constant movement will help fade out the distinct lines and take out the patchiness. Also remember that the garments need to be dampened before it's dipped into the dye bath. And after I've finished off with the tank top, I let it kind of just hang out actually on the lip of another plastic container and move on to the pants. Now it feels a little bit more clumsy to do this with the pants because there's more fabric to deal with, so I'm using a spatula to help me with this trampolining movement in and out of the dye solution. And I also use the spatula to help me spread out the fabric so that it will prevent any kind of patchiness. And I also have to flip the fabric over to make sure that there's evenness in the dyeing. Also remember that both pieces need to be plunged into the ColourStay dye fixative, and only the portions that are dyed should be in the fixative bath. I was really happy with the corrections made to the fuchsia portions of the matching set. Then after taking some pictures in the sun, I could see very clearly the demarcation lines in the tangerine portions of the outfit, which really bothered me, which means I had to go back and do this constant dip dyeing to the tangerine portions of the outfit. And so you see me, here I am the next day doing the same thing. And remember, this has to be done for 10 minutes so that it will be effective with good results. And this trampolining motion is like making the garments dance inside the dye water. And after the tank top is done, I moved on to the pants, and the same thing, same old, and back into the ColourStay dye fixative, and maybe reveal number 3 will be it. Voila! I'm third time lucky with this whole ombre dip dyeing business, and I am so happy. Let me give you a better look of the whole garment. Ta-da! Here's my new matching set. Ashton top and Winslow culottes in ombre dip dyeing in the colors of sunset. It's sunset happening here right now, guys. I learned so much through this first attempt at ombre dip dyeing, and I hope that you are also learning through my mistakes and my fumbling through everything. First thing is that this ombre dip dyeing, there are sort of 2 techniques. The first technique is the one with the time intervals, where you start dipping in the darker shade, and then after a certain time interval, you dip in a little bit more for a slightly lighter shade. Now, this time interval dip dyeing produces a kind of ombre effect with kind of like a more defined line, and it's really good for the jacket that I did before. And let me show you. So here's the jacket that I'm talking about. this dip dyeing was done with rubber bands that clearly demarcated the lines where the shades are going to get lighter. So it was easier to do, and it creates a really lovely effect like this. But on something like this without rubber bands, I feel like I prefer the other technique, which is you just constantly trampoline your garment inside the dye bath for at least 10 minutes. The other thing I learned is that the first 10 minutes for ombre dip dyeing is the most important for this trampolining technique, up and down, to create the gradual gradation of colors moving from darker to lighter. So if you remember, before I showed you a result that I didn't really like, I'll bring up the photo here, and you can see when I corrected it, this line that was used to be here, it kind of faded away, and this is something that I was looking for. Of course, you can do the dip dyeing with clearer lines. It's completely a designer's choice situation happening. It's just I wanted more of this effect, and I really like how the colors are interacting here. And you can really see the fuchsia and the lightening of the orange into the pinks and then the raspberry. So, what else did I learn? Oh yeah, let me show you the dress. Here's the dress. Here you get a better look. It also has the ombre effect, and I wanted to tell you what I learned here. I needed really better planning of where the separation of color was going to happen. You see, what I would prefer is if the color, the separation of color started where my fingertips are instead of this higher up placement that I think doesn't work as well. But you know what? This dress is so much better. It's an upgrade from the white that it was from before. There were some sweat stains at the underarm area, and this dip dyeing just basically eliminated the staining, and it's just bringing color into my life, which is fantastic. Let me change back to the other one. Hey, I'm back with a matching set. As I was saying, there's also something else that I learned from this experience, which is I was probably too ambitious starting out with dyeing a whole matching set, like 2 pieces of garments at the same time. I should have just focused on one garment, like a t-shirt or just the top, to perfect the dyeing technique, especially when it was my first time. When I had 2 garments to take care of, it was kind of like this for me. So maybe you want to avoid this experience of like feeling torn between 2 lovers by focusing on one. Be monogamous for your first attempt, and then after that maybe you can go a little bit more crazy. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, what else did I learn? As I was saying, the first 10 minutes are really, really important. So if you really want that gradual gradation of colors, then your first 10 minutes, that's when you want to get that done. I didn't do that. I kind of started off with the time interval, and that produced a result that I didn't like, and then I moved on for the other attempts where I started to do this for a better gradation of color. So you really need to focus in the first 10 minutes. Make sure your phone is switched off. I had an unforeseen circumstance or a disaster of glass breaking, and I had to take care of that, and that produced like these even more defined lines than I wanted from the time interval technique. So that's about it, guys. I hope you had fun, because I had loads of fun learning about ombre dip dyeing. Thanks for staying with me throughout this episode, and come back for more. And yes, we didn't dance today.
So dance!